Ottoline and the Yellow Cat. Chapter 1. Ottoline lived on the 24th floor of the Pepper Pot building. It was called the P.W.H. Huffledick Tower, but it looked just like a pepper pot, so everyone called it the Pepper Pot building. She lived in apartment 243 with Mr. Munro, who was small and hairy and didn't have like the rain or having his hair brushed. Ottoline, on the other hand, loved all kinds of weather, particularly rain, because she loved splashing in puddles. She also liked brushing Mr. Munro's hair. She found it very relaxing, and it helped her to think, especially if there was a tricky problem to solve or clever plan to work out. Ottoline liked solving tricky problems and working out clever plans even more than she liked splashing in puddles. She kept her eyes and ears open in case she came across anything unusual or interesting. So did Mr. Munro. Ottoline's parents traveled the world collecting interesting things. Apartment 243 was full of things that they collected. Her parents had promised that one day when she was older, Ottoline could join them on their travels, but until then she was to stay at home to look after their collections. Ottoline didn't mind too much because she had Mr. Munro for company. One day, while out for an afternoon stroll, Mr. Munro noticed a poster stuck to a lamppost outside the Graverman's Korean Theatre. He carefully peeled it off and folded it up. Then he put it under his arm. As being small and hairy, Mr. Munro didn't have any pockets. He took it home with him. After that afternoon, Ottoline was dusting the fourth spotted teapot collection when she felt a tap on her shoulders. It was Mr. Munro. He showed her the post from the lamppost outside the Grabber Korean Theatre. "How interesting," Ottoline said. "You don't have any more of these by any chance?" Mr. Munro went to his room. It was very untidy. When he came back, Ottoline was reorganizing her old shoe collection. Ottoline had two collections that were all on her own. One was odd shoe collection, of which she was very proud. Whenever Ottoline brought a pair of shoes, she would wear one and put the other one in her collection. Mr. Munro showed Ottoline the posters he collected from the lamppost all over town. Ottoline looked at them for a long time. "I don't suppose," she said, "you'd let me brush your hair?" While she brushed Mr. Munro's hair, Ottoline looked more closely at the posters. That evening, Ottoline and Mr. Munro sat down to dinner. Ottoline had grilled cheese and cinnamon toast freshly delivered to the table by Home-Cooked Meal Company. Mr. Munro had a bowl of porridge and a hot mug of chocolate, which was the only meal he ever ate. After dinner, Ottoline went down to the laundry room in the basement of the Pepper Pot building. Ottoline liked to do her own laundry for two reasons. Firstly, she liked the washing machine, and secondly, she liked standing on tiptoes and listened to the pipes in the basement ceiling. Ottoline could hear lots of interesting conversation that went on in the other apartments. She didn't tell Mr. Munro as she knew he wouldn't approve. Although it wasn't very polite, Ottoline found eavesdropping often helped her to solve tricky problems and think of clever plans. It was Ottoline who found Mrs. Pasternak's missing monkey with a trail of honey-coated peanuts. And when the man from apartment 36 got his toes stuck in a tap, it was Ottoline who called the fire badger. That evening, Ottoline was doing her laundry and listening to the pipes as usual when a large hairy arm appeared from behind one of the washing machines and grabbed a pair of Ottoline's strappy socks. Ottoline peered into the shadows. "You ought to be ashamed of yourself, stealing socks," said Ottoline. "So should you, listening into other people's conversation," said the bear. "I won't tell if you won't," said Ottoline. Chapter 2. Mr. Munro was sitting in the Bear Mayor armchair reading a newspaper. Mr. Munro often read his newspaper if he had trouble getting to sleep or had a bad dream about the bug in the Norway. He liked to read the travel section about holidays and tropical islands and sunny beaches. Several pages caught Ottoline's eyes. Ottoline got out a pair of Baseline's peeling shears from the scissor collection and carefully cut out several items to put in her notebook. Mr. Munro didn't notice. He was engrossed in the story about the Gobi Desert, where it hardly ever rains. That night, after the Smith technician had pumped the pillows and drawn the curtains, Ottoline got out of bed and went to her special disguise wardrobe. Ottoline was a mistress of disguise and had a diploma to prove it from the Who Are You Company of Spudfudge. When she was ready, she knocked on Mr. Munro's door. "Your hair could do with a brush," said Ottoline when he opened the door. But we haven't got time for that now. Here, put this on." She handed Mr. Munro a large shabby raincoat. Mr. Munro handed her an umbrella just in case. They set off through the city. And very soon were off the between tracks. They came to an old warehouse. Ottoline studied her notebook. There was a sign on the door which read, "The Lapdog Agency, by appointment only." Mr. Munro was going to ring the bell, but Ottoline stopped him. Instead, they looked through a rather grubby window. This is what they saw. The poker players looked strangely familiar. Behind them, a cockatoo was talking into the telephone. "I'm very sorry, ma'am, but that's company policy," the cockatoo was saying. "If you lose a lapdog we supplied you in, we can't trust you with another one now, can we? Goodbye." The cockatoo put the receiver down, just as the yellow cat walked in. "Good evening, boys," she purred. "Have a nice week?" The poker players wagged their tails. "Excellent," purred the yellow cat. "Given Mrs. Snuggerworm the slip, I see, McMurtagh," she said, patting a small Lancashire tailor on the head. "That's right, boss," snarled the dog. "I ran out of photo parlor after one of those perfume baths and kept on running." "Good work," said the yellow cat. "Now, boys, time for business. Show me what you got." The poker players put down their cards and picked up the pencils and started scribbling. "Bring them to me, Cliff," said the yellow cat. The cockatoo flapped about, gathering up the drawings in his beak, and took them to the yellow cat. "Excellent," she purred. A Panagese lapdog dropped his doggy juice. "I ran up in the park this morning. Mrs. Lawyer threw me a stick and she's still waiting for it, but I'm none got back." The yellow cat smiled. "If this information is correct, my furry friend," she purred, "then you won't have to go." Chapter 3. The next morning, Ottoline woke up rather later than usual. She put on her Mogolina dressing gown and stiffed a yawn stuffed down the hallway. There was a postcard on the doormat. This was on the front, and this was on the back. Ottoline put the umbrellas back in the stand and yawned sleepily. Then she went down to her room and put the postcard in her postcard collection. Ottoline loved her art shoe collection. This was because all the postcards were from her parents. Ottoline liked looking at the pictures at a faraway place of the front of the postcard. And she loved reading the message on the back because they made her feel as if her parents weren't so far away. Ottoline was just patting the postcard in her collection when Mr. Munro walked in. She showed him the postcard. He looked at it for a long time and then picked up Ottoline's hairbrush. "My hair needs brushing?" asked Ottoline. Mr. Munro nodded. Next to having his own hair brushed, the thing he liked least was brushing someone else. But he knew that it would make Ottoline feel better, so he did the best he could. For breakfast that morning, Ottoline had strawberry bagel and apple juice. Mr. Munro had porridge and hot chocolate, which he didn't touch because he was too busy reading the newspaper. "It's rude to read at the table," said Ottoline. After breakfast, as they sat down together on the big Bedimere sofa, Mr. Munro showed Ottoline something he had underlined in the newspaper in red crayon. "The big city Inquirer cat burglar stinks again." "Mr. Munro," said Ottoline, "I think it's time you practice your special disguise." Chapter 4. Just then the doorbell rang. Mr. Munro went to the front door and opened it. At 10 o'clock, Mr. Munro came out of his room and tapped Ottoline on the shoulder. He was wearing a large shabby raincoat. Ottoline checked the curtains. "Not now, Mr. Munro." "Good morning, Mr. Munro." Mr. Munro went back to his room. At 11 o'clock, Mr. Munro tapped Ottoline on the shoulder again. He was wearing a large shabby raincoat and a pair of dark glasses. Ottoline looked at the door handles. "Not now, Mr. Munro." "Nice to see you, Mr. Munro." Mr. Munro went back to his room. At 12 o'clock, Mr. Munro coughed loudly. He was wearing a large shabby raincoat, a pair of dark glasses, and the Empire of Heligal's hat. Ottoline examined the toothpaste. "Not now, Mr. Munro," she said. Mr. Munro went back to his room and slammed the door. "Mr. Munro!" At lunch, there was very little conversation. At 2 o'clock, Mr. Munro was wearing a large shabby raincoat, a pair of dark glasses, the Empire of Heligal's hat, and an extremely long scarf. At 3 o'clock, Ottoline expected her knickers. "Not now," she said. At 4 o'clock, "Not now," Ottoline said. At 5 o'clock, "Not now." When everyone had gone, Ottoline closed the front door and turned around. "Now, Mr. Munro," she said. "What is it?" But Mr. Munro wasn't there. Chapter 5. Mr. Munro climbed up the fire escape, which led to the roof of the Pepper Pot building. Every so often, he paused and listened at the windows. Mr. Munro liked listening to the interesting conversation that went on in the other apartments. But he didn't tell Ottoline as he knew she wouldn't approve. Mr. Munro stood on the roof and at the Pepper Pot building and thought for a long time. It began to rain, very heavily. As he stood in the rain, Mr. Munro thought about the cold, wet fog in Norway. He remembered how Ottoline's parents, Professor and Professor Brown, had found him and had invited him to come home with them to the Pepper Pot building. Professor Brown lent him his new raincoat, and Professor Brown gave him her sunglasses. The three of them sailed home on the SS Stormheim. To avoid unwanted attention, they called him Mr. Munro, although his real name was something in Norwegian that meant small hairy bug person. From the moment she was born, Ottoline and Mr. Munro was inseparable. He took her for a walk. He let her brush his hair. He even let her give him a bath, but only once. But whatever they did, Ottoline's parents knew that as long as Mr. Munro was with her, their daughter would always be safe. The rain stopped and Mr. Munro went down to the fire escape. He didn't feel sad any longer. He stood on the doormat until he had stopped dripping. It felt good to be out of the rain. It felt good to be far away from the bog in Norway. It felt good to be living in the Pepper Pot building. Most of all, it felt good to have Ottoline as his best friend. Mr. Munro found Ottoline sitting in the bed-your-mare rocking chair. "Would you like me to brush your hair?" asked Ottoline. Mr. Munro nodded. When she had finished, Ottoline looked at Mr. Munro for a long time. Then she looked at her notebook. "I've got a clever plan," she said. Chapter 6. Late that night, there was a knock on the doormat. Mr. Munro found Ottoline sitting in the bed-your-mare rocking chair. "Would you like me to brush your hair?" asked Ottoline. Mr. Munro nodded. When she had finished, Ottoline looked at Mr. Munro for a long time. Then she looked at the notebook. "I've got a clever plan," she said. Chapter 6. Late that night, there was a knock on the door of the old warehouse. "Go away!" yelled Yellow Cat. "We're closed. Keller by appointment only." There was another knock on the door, followed by a rather feeble bark. All right," complained the Yellow Cat. "Keep your tail on. I'm coming. The Yellow Cat opened the door. There was a small hairy dog outside. The small hairy dog handed the Yellow Cat a card. "Beamy Bottlenose 2, Empire of Heligodland. Per degree Norwegian lapdog." "Lapdog, eh?" said the Yellow Cat. "Then you come to the right place." She stepped aside and let him in. "Look what the cat dragged in," said the Yellow Cat. "Boys, meet Beamy Bottlenose 2, Empire of Heligodland." The poker players looked up from their games. "We can call him Nosy," said the Yellow Cat. "Nosy, meet the gang." The gangs wagged their tails and made room for Nosy at the table. "Cleve," said the Yellow Cat, "make sure the boys don't stay up too late. We've got work tomorrow." "You are the boss," squawked the cockatoo. "So where are you from, stranger?" said Lud the Fang. Nosy gave him his card. Lud looked at it. "Norway," he said. "It can get very wet in Norway." Nosy nodded and put a playing card on the table. "Empire of Heligodland," said Butch Heelbug, chewing on his dog treat. "I once saw the Empire of Heligodland. Wore a splendid hat." Nosy nodded and played another card. "Care for a dog treat?" offered McMurtagh. Nosy shook his head. "Don't say too much, did you?" McMurtagh snarled. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" "Never mind," said the Sundance pup. "He's just sore because his last owner took him to the poodle parlor for a shampoo." Nosy laid his playing card on the table. "Full house!" squawked Cleve. "You win! Time for bed!" Nosy didn't sleep well in the lapdog basket. Rudolph Pang snored. Snarl McMathern whimpered. Bunchy Hillbugs chased Squirrel in his dream, and the Sundance Pup had terrible wind. He was just beginning to doze off when the door opened and the yellow cat crept in. The yellow cat opened her bag and took out an emerald necklace, which she carefully hid beneath the floorboard. Just then, the telephone rang. The yellow cat leaped into the air with surprise, and Cliff woke up with a squawk. "Don't just perch there," hissed the yellow cat. "Answer it." Cliff picked up the receiver. "The Rat Dog Agency, how may we help you?" he said. "A rat dog? Certainly, madam. We have an excellent circasian. Would you care to make an appointment? This morning? Yes, I think we can fit you in. What time? Now? Well, suppose. Let me see." Just then there was a knock on the door. "Must I do everything myself?" said the yellow cat, slinking up the stairs. Chapter 7. The yellow cat opened the door. An extremely large lady was standing on the doorstep. "Can I help you?" asked the yellow cat. "Mrs. Ursula Johnson Smith," said the large lady grandly. "I am an incredibly rich but lonely lady, and I'd like the lapdog to take home with me. I've just made an appointment." Clay put down the telephone. "Please come in, Mrs. Johnson Smith," purred the yellow cat. "You can call me Ursula," said the lady. "Showtime," said Yellow Cat. The lapdogs lined up against the wall. They held cards with their names on. Mrs. Jensen Smith walked slowly down the line and looked carefully at each lapdog. "Can I just say what an exquisite head you're wearing, Mrs. Johnson Smith?" purred the yellow cat, rubbing her paws. "And what a simply stunning outfit!" "My head?" said Miss Johnson Smith. "Do you like it? It was a present from the Empire of Shetland. And these jeans, oh, they're straight from the laundry. I just threw them together." Mrs. Jensen Smith stopped at the front of the last lapdog. "I will take this one." "Excellent choice," purred the yellow cat. "Beamy bottlenose to Empire of Heligoland. It's a pedigree Norwegian lapdog." "It can be very wet in Norway," said Mrs. Jensen Smith thoughtfully. "Send me the beer. Apartment 243, the Pepper Building, Cyril Street." When Mr. Monroe got back to the apartment 243, he found a postcard on the doormat. He picked it up and went up to see Ottoline. She was busy writing in her notebook. Mr. Monroe handed her the postcard. "Your ribbon has come out undone," she said. "It looks very wet, doesn't it, Mr. Monroe?" said Ottoline. "Mr. Monroe?" But Mr. Monroe was fast asleep. Chapter 8. The next morning, Mr. Monroe got up bright and early. He wandered around the apartment and making careful notes. The doorbell rang. Ottoline went to the front door and opened it. "We're not to worry, I hope," said the chief from the home-cooked meal company. "No," said Ottoline. "There's lots to do already." For breakfast, Ottoline had waffles and maple syrup. Mr. Monroe had porridge and hot chocolate, which he didn't touch because he was busy finishing his notes. "It's lewd to write at the table," said Ottoline. After breakfast, they sat down on the Badmeyer Paufe. Mr. Monroe showed Ottoline his notes. She looked at them for a long time, and then she said, "Good work, Mr. Monroe." Then Ottoline brushed Mr. Monroe's hair. very truly, and tied a ribbon on it. She kissed him on the forehead. "You're very brave," she said. "Now you'd better go." Mr. Monroe nodded. Ottoline waited until Mr. Monroe had gone, and then she walked to the Grover's Korean Theater. She carefully unfolded a poster and stuck it in the lamppost. Lost. A pedigree Norwegian lapdog. Answered to the name of Beamy Bottomnose II, Empire of Heligoland Land. Much missed by his loving owner, large reward. Contact Mrs. Jensen Smith, apartment 243, the Peppa Pop Building, 3rd Street, BC. Mr. Monroe knocked on the warehouse door. "Hiya, Nosy," said the yellow cat. "You're a fast worker." The gang crowded around. "Okay, show me what you got," said the yellow cat. Nosy handed her a piece of paper. Apartment 243, the Peppa Pop Building. Front door, umbrellas, collecting, sitting room, poof, collections, dining room, kitchen, bathroom, bed, window, post, door are in this cupboard. Empire's hats, extremely small paintings, sofa, rocking chair collections, armchair, dressing table, a shoe collection, warehouse, window, Mrs. Jensen Smith's bedroom. Nothing interesting here. The yellow cat looked at the drawing for a long time. "Excellent work, Nosy," she purred, and left the room. "Excellent. Welcome back," snarled Martha, feeling lucky. Nosy nodded and sat down at the table with the other lapdogs. Bunch Hillbug delayed the cards. "Didn't take you long to give your owner the slip," the loop the fang. "Very careless, some of these ladies." Nosy nodded again and played the card. "So, is the rumor true?" Butch said to the loop. "Are you thinking of going back to Mrs. Lloyd?" "What if I am?" replied the loot. "Sometimes a dog just wants a quiet lap sit on the floor the rest of his days. I'm getting too old for life on the run." "I miss Mrs. Armstrong," said the Sundance Pup with a sniff. Nosy put his last card on the table. "Full house!" squeaked Clip as the cockatoo. "You win!" Chapter 9. That night, the lapdogs slept in their basket, and the yellow cat tiptoed on the stairs and out of the front door without a sound. Bunch Hillbug turned over and thumped his tail, and Lou the Fang licked his chops noisily and got comfortable before he started snoring again. Mr. Monroe gently removed Snarl, Mr. Murtag's front paws from his head and quietly climbed out of the basket. Reaching up, he tugged his bow undone and let the ribbon fall to the floor. Then he tiptoed across the corner of the room. Mr. Monroe carefully trilled the loose floorboard. It gave a small crack. Crack! Cliff woke up and saw Mr. Monroe with the loot. He let out a piercing screech. "Stop, thief!" But Mr. Monroe was prepared. He tied up Cliff firmly with the polka dot ribbon, wrapped it once around his legs, around his beaks, and then tied a bow in it and pulled it together. Said the Cliff. Mr. Monroe then sat down at the table, picked up the telephone, and began to call. Just then, the doorbell rang and the lapdogs woke up. "What time is it?" snarled Martha. "I was having a wonderful dream about squirrels," yawned Bunch Hillbug. "What's that terrible smell?" asked the Sundance Pup. Said the Claves, the cockatoo. The doorbell rang again. Mr. Monroe climbed up the stairs and opened the door. Four ladies came in. They looked strangely familiar. Mr. Monroe presented each of them with their stolen jewels. "Time to come home, you nasty boys," said Mrs. Armstrong. The Sundance pub wagged its tail. "Walkie," said Mrs. Lawyer. Luther Fang barked excitedly. "Here, boy," said Mrs. Wilson. And Bunch Hillbug rushed up to her. "Come to Mommy," cooed Pinky Nervadler. "My little poodle doodle. You'll never take me alive," snarled Snell McMathel. The ladies thanked Mr. Monroe for all his help. They promised not to press change as long as the lapdogs behaved themselves. And when they had gone, Mr. Monroe locked the door of the old warehouse. Then he picked up Cliff the cockatoo and set off towards the Pepper Pot building. Chapter 10. The yellow cat climbed in through the windows of apartment 243 and looked around. With one gloved paw, she reached into her bag and took out Mr. Monroe's drawing. She examined it carefully and crept on tiptoes towards Ottoline's room. Opening the door with a crack, the yellow cat slipped inside. She didn't make a noise. Then she sneaked over the cupboard and slowly opened it. Suddenly the lights flicked on. With a startled meow, the yellow cat sprang on her foot and dashed to the door. Dodging a collapsed tower of neatly folded cardigans, dotting an umbrella of perfectly plumped pillows, she leaped over the vacuum cleaner and the floor mop. She swerved under the swinging shower curtain. The yellow cat struggled to a grip on the shiny doorknob. She was about to try for the window when half a dozen cooked custard pies sailed through the air towards her, and an incredibly large bear jumped out of the neatly made bed. "Mrs. Jensen Smith!" yelled the yellow cat. The bear caught her in a big bear hug. "Curses!" hissed the yellow cat. "Hello," said Ottoline. "You didn't really think you'd get away with it, did you?" "Tell me, how did you do it?" asked the yellow cat. "Simple, with the help of my friend," said Ottoline, "and a clever plan." Just then the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Monroe and Pet Police. "We'll take it from here, miss," said the Pet Police to Ottoline. "We've been after those two for quite a long time." "What will happen to them?" asked Ottoline. "They will be going back away for a long time," said policeman, "to a petting zoo in the country." "Curses!" said Cliff the cockatoo. Ottoline turned to Mr. Monroe and gave him a hug. "I'm very, very proud of you," she said. Mr. Monroe nodded, and Ottoline, who knew Mr. Monroe better than anyone in the world, was sure that he was smiling. Just then Ottoline saw the postcard on the doormat. She picked it up. It was from her parents. The end.